power will be coming out relatively soon, perhaps. But you can always sign up at ARC or check the ARC website to keep an eye on that funding opportunity next. And then the next opportunity that I'd like to highlight is Inspire, and that is investments supporting partnerships and recovery ecosystems initiatives. So this is also a competitive funding opportunity that is for strengthening local recovery to work ecosystems. Those are grants up to, so workforce investment projects. Those are grants up to $500,000. And last year, ARC awarded $11 million in projects for the Inspire grant opportunity. And same application cycle, winter to early spring. And I believe that NOSA is potentially coming out soon as well. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and so now we'll go through our Virginia ARC programs. As Christy mentioned earlier, we have the Area Development Program, which is our state program, goes through the state of Virginia. It includes both construction projects and non-construction projects. We also have the Access Road Program, which is a subset of construction projects, but deals with ancillary economic development around economic road corridors. So basically a road linking to other potential businesses. And here you can see our LDDs. We're in the beautiful New River Valley today, but yesterday we were down in Abington. So these are all the ARC PDCs that we work with.
Do we have any PDC staff in here? I know we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So Virginia's 4-year ARC development plan priorities align very much with the 5 goals set by ARC. So these will be the promotion of regional partnerships that support regional economic development, encouraging the diversification of the economic base, and enhancing local entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial activities. And with that, to support the development of world-class labor workforce that is both highly skilled and competitive, and appropriately trained for the upcoming job market here in Appalachia that we're trying to innovate. In addition to providing adequate health care for these workers. Similarly, tourism and natural and cultural assets is a core priority and goal, preserving and developing the beautiful Appalachian region that we have here, as well as strengthening the current and next generation of local capacity leaders, which is a lot of you here today, and hopefully we can enhance our collaboration to make Appalachian better for all of us. So these are Virginia's funding caps for construction projects. You can get up to $700,000 or $1 million for access road project. For a non-construction project or a planning grant, up to $100,000. For regional planning grants, so going into more than one locality, more than one county, you can ask for up to $100,000. And for regional non-construction projects, again, in multiple counties, up to $300,000. So how do you start? So step 0 is deciding to apply, having the intention. We have a project, we have a certain outcome that we're trying to deliver in our town, which is what a lot of you are here doing today. So a lot of the eligible applicants are nonprofits, educational institutions, colleges, universities, PDCs, state, local government entities, townships, cities, are all eligible. If you are a nonprofit, you must show your 501c3 status. For-profit organizations and private organizations are not eligible to apply. So if for all eligible funding requests, you must meet following criteria. You must describe the proposed project. What are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? And what are the performance measures? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to have a certain amount of students trained and improved, or workers trained and improved? Or is it a broadband project that you have linear feet, a fiber that you're building? So what is the intended outcome? does the applicant have the capacity to implement the project? Do you have enough staff that is skilled enough to be handling grant administration and the management of a big construction project? And if you as the applicant do not, many times the PDC can come in and assist you with both grant writing and grant management. And do you have other non-ARC resources? So we look at your match. Do you have additional match beyond ARC funds from either other state partners, from donations, from other cash match that may come? And does your project collaborate with local partners? Are you consulting with the PDC? Are you looking across other counties within your PDC to see if your efforts complement or duplicate theirs to see how we can have the best project within the region? Similarly, the project has to be sustainable. Can this project last beyond federal funding, beyond the end of the contract? What it's going to look like 5-10 years down the road? And as I mentioned before, make sure you reach out to both your ARC partners in Washington, your state ARC program manager, so Bill, and your planning district commissions. They all have a wealth of information, and we're all here to help you achieve socioeconomic parity in Appalachia. So Virginia's ARC application process goes from the local to the commission level, starting with project idea development. So what are we doing? Who are we doing it for? Why do we need to do it? After that, you will contact your PDC, informing them that you intend to apply. Depending on the PDC, they each have their preferences for consultation based upon how much they want to discuss your project with you prior to application. Our applications will open next week, I believe on Monday.
I said Monday, Tuesday.
Sure, Monday. If you want to submit a full application on President's Day, you are welcome to do it. It will be open. I will not review it. And so you have about, what is that, a little over 2 months to submit it. So April 30th is our very hard deadline. Most applications come in about a month prior. If you need any help or have any ideas prior to that, please give me a call and we can plan a technical assistance session. After applications are submitted, DHCD, me, Tamara, and Bill will review them based on Virginia state priorities, our 4-year development plan, and the ARC goals and strategies. Based on that, the governor will issue their recommendations. Again, they do not always recommend all the projects that, all the applications that came through. The governor will then submit those recommendations to ARC Washington. So then it goes into Eve and Christie's lab. They review the applications, and they will send any follow-up questions or annotations within the grant management system called Pathways, which is very easy and user-friendly, so don't worry about it. So after maybe a month or two going back and forth, or less, depending on how simple the project could be, then the applicant is notified of approval and signs the ARC grant agreement. Then you enter pre-contract negotiations with a registered state basic agency who manages our construction projects, which is under Bill Hartley in the Abingdon field office. So how does Virginia review your application? Well, again, all applications are submitted through CAMS, our management system, grant management system, and evaluated on ARC's strategic goals, on Virginia's 4-year development plan, ARC goals, the general economic impact. So is this a big infrastructure project? Are we looking to connect 200 homes to water and sewer, or is it a smaller local capacity issue that we're looking for? And again, the performance measures, what do we expect to see measured, data driven afterwards? Are we looking at a lot of people trained, a lot of jobs coming into the community? Similarly, is your budget consistent? Are all your documentation consistent? Do you have all of your match confirmed? Does the applicant have the organizational capacity or the sustainability plans long term after federal grant funds are finished? And similarly, are you targeting distressed counties and areas, which is more in Southwest Virginia, Lee, Dickinson. What are other distressed counties?
Why, oh, but why is it mechanic?
Wise and McCann. There.
Call me, I wasn't paying attention.
I'm sorry. And the governor's recommendation, again, not all applications are recommended to ARC at the end. DHCD recommends the projects that align best with state priorities. The governor reviews and approves which projects Virginia will submit to ARC. All construction projects managed by the state RSBA and all non-construction projects are directly administered and managed by ARC Washington. So that would be more Christie's purview. Again, all applications will start in CAMS on DHCD end. After we review your application, we'll let you know if it has passed or not. From then on, once it gets approved by the governor and goes to ARC, you will input the information into Pathways. And Pathways is good because it allows both the state and ARC to be able to give requests or ask for revisions within the system, so we could all technically look at it at the same time without getting buried in a long line of emails. So I
To say, you guys hear us chuckle every time. Pathways is like taking a drink of water every time someone says Pathways. It's a new system and we are all actually, and some of you are in the system if you have a current grant. And so it's not bad. It's a good system. We are chuckling because we all are learning the new system. And so are the other 12 states. And it's very different than ArcNet if you were or have ever used ArcNet. One thing that came up yesterday that we will share, and I'll stand up when I'm talking, is that if you are a PDC, if you do have your planning district commission work on an application with you, they actually are added into Pathways as a collaborator. And so if you go through CAMP, if you ever use our system, currently planning district commissions who work on applications or manage grants can also be added to CAMP as a consultant. And so in Pathways, they will also be able to literally collaborate with you in real time. And so to Omar's part of the reason we're chuckling is because we actually are going through applications in Pathways, like even our own. And so what happens is to Omar's point, if your application does get recommended, we're going to do a separate section on congratulations, the governor's recommended you. And by the way, you're going to copy and paste everything you just put in CAMS and put it in Pathways. And there are some, I think one of the great things I think that's important about Pathways is that for those of you who do not like doing the SF424 forms, all of them, or any of them, you don't have to do those forms anymore. I think we should all laugh. And the reason we don't do them is because they're fillable tables in Pathways. And so we're really excited about it because if you've ever, and I'm not going to hopefully chase anyone off that's not had an ARC grant or have done this before, those are a burden, especially when you're trying to like sometimes match calculations off and then multiple revisions happen on numbers. And so the good thing is we're really excited that you don't have to do those forms. And you will be excited that you don't have to do them at all. And they're fillable. And the good thing is that with the reviewers at ARC, it's easier for them to be able to review the numbers and you just go in and literally tweak them as opposed to, because I'm a person that also has to, well, I'll be signing them now for other programs, but if you're not the signatory for those forms, you always have to get like your county administrator or your town manager, and sometimes they're not available to sign off or just don't have time. And so the good thing is that they will still have to click submit, but you can actually go in and do the work. And so we're excited about them making this a more automated process. And so we're chuckling because we all are just kind of going through. For those of you who were around for CAMS in 2014, it's kind of back then. So we are like, so it's not bad. I don't want you guys to get the perception that Pathways is bad. We're excited about being able to use it. And to Omar's point, if you currently work with us, we always have to do these things via email. It's like, we need you to go update this form and you have to send it. Then we get it, look at it, go to DC. Now, we can now either do the revision for you, which Omar has the ability to do as well, or you can do your own revision or a PDC. And then it gets back to them really quickly. And I will tell you the amount of time it takes for them to review it is so fast, so fast. And so I didn't want you guys to think we were like being negative about Pathways. It just started in December and it's only February. So and Omar, when you get a chance, because Matt reminded me earlier, every year we do have, every 4 years, we have to develop a new ARC 4-year development plan for the new governor. Governor Spanberger's plan is due to ARC in the fall, and so we will be doing listening sessions throughout the region to identify, we all know the executive, well, I don't know if anyone paid attention to the executive orders. And so we are currently working on her priorities for the region. And so we will be having listening sessions to update, to create her plan, which will result in a new 4-year plan for the Commonwealth. This year, you will be utilizing the current 4-year plan and the priorities based on the plan that was already approved. That's on our website. And then Omar went over earlier this in the presentation. And so I do want to share that we will be coming back out to develop her plan that will be the requirement for next year's application. So we did want to share an update on that. All right, sorry, Omar.
No, thank you. And yeah, as she was saying, pathways, nothing to be scared about. If you get to that point, that's honestly great because you're that much closer to getting your money and starting a project. So focus on making a strong application and the rest will follow through. So yeah, and again, we have done everything in our power to make the Virginia CAMS application align exactly with ARC's application template. So what you will see on their website is the same thing you're going to see on our end. Avoid as much duplication as possible. This includes all the required documentation for application package. It gives you guidance, links to ARC and Virginia's website. And it's also formatted in the same order and sections that's also in Pathways.
So, Omar, would you give them a tip of maybe working on their application in Microsoft Word, or I dated myself yesterday, Word perfect for some of us who are genetics. And so would you recommend folks create their application in Microsoft Word?
Yeah, absolutely. You can, whichever is, yeah, that is most easiest. Please do that.
So you can paste it.
Exactly. Yeah, you can just download the template, take off the questions and just type under them. Even if it's not neat, I can always go back in and fix it a little bit.
So one thing we have not figured out is if Pathways has character limits. I think I did ask the question. So CAMS has character limits. We don't know if Pathways will have character limits.
It does not.
I think we said no.
No, there's no character limits. There's limits on the amount of pages of stuff you can upload.
Okay, so they're limited on uploads. We're limited on character. So we probably will say, do not write any more than what you wrote in our application. I often tell the in between Virginia and the submission, for some reason, we just want to tell all our business to ARC when we write applications, which is wonderful. But sometimes they just need to know specific information. And so the good thing is that you will be clear and concise in CAMS, and if you're recommended, you will take that information and put it right into Pathways.
And some of the resources that we have are ARC's investment priorities, past projects, both in this region and in other states, to help you think about other possibilities, research reports, so aggregate data on projects, again, both in Virginia over a certain amount of time, showing how we've developed and come to this point. Virginia's ARC program handbook, which contains all the guidelines to making a successful application, containing all the questions. As Tamara said yesterday, it's an open book test, so shouldn't be that bad. And from there, we'll go on to Eve. I can, if you want.
I can click. It's helpful if I can see like where things are going.
Okay. Hey, everyone. I'm going to go through kind of the nitty gritty of what makes a good application. What are the pieces of content that ARC Washington likes to see and ARC Virginia likes to see. And hopefully by the end of today, after a little activity, you will have a really good idea of the types of information to make a compelling narrative and have a good start on your application. So we're going to go through 8 different kind of key points that are talked about throughout the entire application. So we'll talk about the first thing, which is making sure your project actually aligns with our goals, because that is the first thing that you will get rejected for. Second, we're going to talk about economic impact and how to tell that narrative and make sure that your project, has those outcomes and also is a compelling economic development project. Talk about the narrative. We'll talk about how to demonstrate community buy-in. We'll talk about some of the complicated budget things in a little bit of detail. We'll talk about match funding and then demonstrating your organizational capacity. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a couple of some of our project types have a couple of extra things we need from y'all. So we'll kind of touch on those as well. So. All right, so first we're going to talk about the goal. So first and foremost, any project that ARC funds at both the state and the federal level needs to align with the strategic goals. So Tamara talked about the 5 strategic goals that ARC Washington has. ARC Virginia also has their own goals. They align very similarly, but when you apply for a project, you need to make sure you identify what goal at both the state and the federal level your project is going to align with. So a couple links here. You can see the strategic plan for ARC. Like she said, it's going to be updating, but we're just changing language a little bit, but all of the goals and the content will stay the same. And then also the Virginia website. So open those, find where your goals or your project aligns, just make sure you have that. So just a little bit more detail. So begin with the end in mind. So when you have your project, your goal is to tell a compelling story about why your project should be funded and how your project is going to advance XYZ goal. So when you have your project idea, make sure you start then and figure out, okay, what goal does ARC, Washington, and Virginia want to see advanced? And make sure you work backwards from there. So, your application is first going to go through the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development and Virginia ARC, but ultimately it is also going to come to us. So the cool thing about the Area Development Program is that it is a partnership with the states and the federal office. So if your project makes it through Virginia and it's recommended by the governor, it gets to me or Christy, and we're practically golden. There may be a couple things we need to tweak or a couple of areas we'll have questions about, but that's the type of partnership that we have. So make sure you focus first on their goals and then make sure you connect to Virginia's goals as well. And then also when you're, make sure you have the goal in mind too, not just for the narrative, but also for your performance measures. And those are the things that you're going to share of how you're tracking progress. Those should line up and make a compelling story for that goal as well as your budget. So just keep in mind the goal and try to, keep that in front of mind when you're preparing all of the aspects of your project as well. And then lastly, so I have been to the region. Some of us at the Washington office have been to the region, but please make your application and write it in mind for someone who has never been here, doesn't know anything about your community, because that's going to be the best part or the best way to kind of get your story across in a way that, has comprehensive detail. So, yep. Second, and this is also almost equally as important as the goals, is ARC is first and foremost, since the 60s, we have been an economic development organization. And so that's, I think, one of the great things about ARC and why we stay relevant with Congress, why we continue to get funded. It's because we are, trying to create jobs and to bring investment to the region. So a lot of the projects we fund do that, but they may do it through housing. They may do it through some of, outdoor rec or tourism. But with all of those projects, just please keep in mind that there needs to be an economic development there needs to be a direct connection to economic development. So make sure, even if you're applying for a community capacity project, you make that direct connection as to how is that project going to bring additional investment to the region. So please keep that in mind as well. Okay, cool. So we're going to go through just some of the key components for the narrative. So these are all of the kind of sections that our application and their application is going to kind of ask to hear more information about. So we'll talk about how to create a strong overview of your project. We'll talk about how to create a compelling rationale and how to make sure your rationale addresses, all of the goals and rationale is to answer the question. For me, I'm going to ask, why is this project and why should it be funded? And that's where this information will live. And then we'll talk about sustainability and making sure that your project is not only compelling, but will, there's a strong case for it to be continued to be successful beyond ARC funding. So we'll go through those. So for your project description, this is going to be the first kind of chunk of information that we read in the narrative and that they read. You'll have an executive summary, but this should expand on the executive summary. It should talk about the project's primary purpose, the main activities that you're going to accomplish in your work plan, and then the expected impacts, and make sure that those impacts are really hitting home the economic development lens. As we all know, make sure it answers those questions of who, what, where, when, why. We'll also make sure you provide context like we mentioned. So assume the reader has never been to the region, we've never heard of your organization, and we don't know, why it should be funded. Make sure you also describe who the users are going to be. So who in the community has requested the project and who's going to be served. Those are really important. And then for construction projects, make sure to identify the organization that's going to be administering the project. And for all of you, that's going to be the Department of Housing and Community Development. So the cool thing about ARC, in my opinion, is unlike some of the other federal agencies, we don't administer construction projects ourselves in the same way that, HUD does. So that allows us to be more nimble and flexible, and we can get funding out the door because we rely on our state partners to do that construction management. So, yeah.
With the construction projects, DHCD is the registered state
Mhm.
basic agency. A lot of times the actual grant manager for these, it tends to be the planning districts,
Yes.
the LDDs. And so I know in part of this process is talk to them, but also, as you build your budget, you think about this, the grant admin and all of those kind of things that's there with doing the NEPA,
Yeah.
doing the Davis-Bacon compliance and stuff. And we really could not do these projects without the involvement of the PDC. They're a great partner in all this. So again, as you're building this out, thinking of not just this is a project we want to do, but how are we going to implement it? What's it going to look like? That's something we sometimes see. People don't put admin money in, and we're like, who's going to do the labor standards? How the Davis-Bacon, and so that's another reason to talk to your PDC before you apply.
Yeah.
And Bill, is there a penalty for asking for admin money when you write an application to our program?
There is not.
And what is our cap?
It's 10%. So, so again, we encourage you to use that admin money. Sometimes I think the grantees don't realize that they can ask for that. But we know, and again, that whole idea of thinking, having the end in mind.
Right.
If you get the grant, what's it going to look like to implement? We can see you've already thought through how you're going to implement it, that you have capable personnel that understand Davis-Bacon. They don't, it's like, who's this Davis-Bacon guy and why is he making me pay this wage? I mean, because those kind of things are very tricky. And like I say, I do appreciate the work. And I know some of the PDC, the work that y'all do on that to help make sure these projects are move forward and are compliant.
Yeah. And projects compared to the cost of construction, admin is a smaller amount of money. And, when we're investing lots of money, we want to make sure that it's done in a way that's efficient, effective, and long-term. So please add that admin money in. If anything, it adds more confidence that the project is going to have a positive outcome. Cool. So again, assume your reader's never been to the region before, and paint a narrative of the geography as well. And so here's the ARC region. For those of you who don't know, ARC, we classify our counties based on levels of distress. And so every year our ARC Washington puts out your county status. And this is a combined number of a whole bunch of different economic factors. But this is how we calculate match, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is to say, talk about your community, where your county is, talk about where the county lives in the region, in the ARC region, as well as, if you have any areas in your county that are, specifically distressed or have specific challenges, please paint that picture. You're allowed to also upload in your application photos or maps, things like that. All of that helps to create a compelling narrative for your reviewers. So also, one of the big sections in the narrative portion of the application is your rationale, and this should answer the questions like, for me, I'm going to say, why is this the best project and why should we spend the money on this? Have you thought about any other maybe more cost-effective options? What are the other alternatives and things like that? So this is how to kind of create that connection between the problem in your community or the opportunity, the challenge that you're, proposing to solve, and the project and the outcomes. So think about, first and foremost, what's the challenge? How does this impact your community? How does it impact the folks who, live and work and play? And then, how does this project going to address it? Also, we put a lot of value on getting information that demonstrates that the community also values the project and has buy-in as well. So please feel free to, well, not feel free, but it's required to add letters of support from community members who have also said, yes, this is a project I want. It is going to have an impact in my community. So just that. In addition, when you're crafting your rationale, there's just a couple of other questions you should ask yourself and add this information in as well. So one of the large things that ARC puts a priority on is, does your project advance any other larger regional goals? So do you have a plan that was, done by your PDC? Does it identify the problem you're proposing to solve? Or how does your project fit into a larger strategy of economic development? Ask yourself those questions. And if, it plugs in any way, please make sure to say that. We don't want to duplicate efforts, and it goes a long way to show, other people and other organizations have also identified the project as a problem or opportunity. Talk about your alternatives. So is your project the most cost effective? It doesn't have to be the most cost effective, but if it isn't, it should talk about why the project, while it may not be cost effective, is the best project or the best way to address the problem. Evidence of local demand, like I mentioned. Summarize any letters that you can get from community members or businesses that say, yes, please fund this project. And then talk about the long-term impact. So beyond just when the project is over, when the construction is done, talk about how 10 years in the future, this is going to really change or transform your community as well. And then we'll talk, so partnerships as well. ARC places a really high, we love projects that include multiple partners. We don't want projects to exist in a silo, and there's a lot of really great partners in Southwest Virginia that are doing similar work that you can leverage, the personnel, the work that's already been done. So when you're doing your narrative, describe any partners that you have, and beyond just talking about who the partners are, talk about how they are going to be participating in the project. If there's any MOUs or letters or agreements between different partners, please include those. For the second bullet, this is important. So partnership is more than just we support the project. It's helpful to know who supports the project, but a partner in a project sense is going to be someone who's doing something or is supporting the project with a certain action item. So please, include those as well. Those all look very great for reviewers. And then this is just a demonstration of the types of organizations that, can all be partners in these projects. So, universities, private companies are great to have to demonstrate economic impact, state agencies, nonprofit organizations, and then also your PDCs and your other economic development organizations. So just a diagram of that. And then demonstrate organizational capacity. I believe this is Christy. Okay, cool. She's going to go through this portion.
Thank you. Okay, so demonstrating organizational capacity. This is all of these are key components, obviously, to drafting your proposal for your project, but organizational capacity is an opportunity for you to talk about the expertise within the team of your organization. And so that can be related to, have you implemented similar activities to what you're proposing in your project? Does your organization or partner organizations have the expertise and experience managing federal grants? That's a key component that we'll look for in strong applications and strong applicants. It's helpful to identify the qualifications of key individuals that are going to be involved in your project. So we often like to see resumes, anything where you can highlight the information or highlight the expertise that you have within your team. And that also includes why you have selected consultants or contractors to help you implement your project. In addition to subrecipients or subawardees, like, why is this organization or this particular individual important to be a part of this project, either from an implementation standpoint, as far as implementing your project as a whole, or from a grants management perspective. And then, like I said before, attaching resumes or biographical sketches or anything that gives us more information about who's on your team is always helpful to demonstrate organizational capacity. Project sustainability is key as well. And this goes beyond just being able to identify additional funding sources for your project. This is also an opportunity for you to provide some narrative about how there might be ways that you can scale your project, either in like geographic reach, and maybe additional offerings once the initial funding has been provided by ARC, project continuation or expansion, things such as that. And also, I guess, with construction projects, there's an opportunity to demonstrate project sustainability there as well. Like, who will provide ongoing maintenance on the completed project, things such as that. Do you want to cover this one quick? Sorry. I don't do the construction stuff.
Yeah.
So
for construction, financial feasibility is incredibly important because these are high dollar projects. We want to make sure that after the construction has been completed, that there is a business plan or a pro forma that shows how the project's going to continue to be funded and how it's going to be successful into the future. So, we do request, if not require, I'm not sure what the state does, a 5-year pro forma, talking about, okay, they do request a 5-year pro forma. So you should have all that data and make sure that there's a business plan that, beyond the ARC funding, once it's long gone, how is your wastewater treatment plant going to continue to operate, and how is it going to continue to be successful? So, in addition to the pro forma, feasibility studies or business plans, things that can be accomplished with a planning grant, which we'll talk about at some point, are also very helpful. So please keep those in mind as well.
Thank you. So I'll go over some of the components of non-construction projects. One of the things that we require in non-construction projects is part of your budget narrative, and I believe Omar will be going over budget narratives a little bit later. But if you have equipment or supplies that you would like to use ARC or federal funds for to implement your project, this is an important piece of information to make sure that it's included, is a comprehensive list of the equipment and supplies that you will be requesting funds for. And these equipment and supplies will be things that you'll be utilizing for the implementation of your project. So this is different than what I would consider administrative supplies, like copier paper for your office or pens and pencils or, things like that. These are things that are specific to helping you implement your project. And what we'd be looking for is a comprehensive list. And you can see here on this chart is the item description, the cost per item, the number of items, and then obviously the total cost. And it's also helpful to provide a little bit of narrative as to why you need these pieces of equipment or supplies. Financial I thought someone had a question. Financial feasibility. So this is also where we'll talk a little bit more about budget narratives, and that's sort of an expansion of what your budget would look like. But here's where you'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about your match, provide information about post-ARC funding plans and realistic timelines for providing support beyond ARC funding. You've talked a little bit about feasibility studies and business plans that could strengthen your case for financial feasibility, and being able again to show elements of potential scalability of your project. So now I want to move on to performance measures and outcomes, and this is a really important. I know we keep saying every portion of the project is important because they all are, but in different ways. So performance measures and translating the outcomes of your project. Eve talked a little bit about approaching your projects from an economic development lens. And what we're looking for there is for you to be able to show us from a data-driven perspective how implementing your project is going to achieve outcomes. So here's a little visual here. So we'll use this as an example. Let's say there's a project ARC funded for $500,000. That was a project for a theater rehabilitation. And the outputs are things that were immediately produced following the completion of the project. So in this instance, there were 500 new visitor days after this theater rehabilitation. 3,000 square feet of the theater was improved, and one community was served. And the outputs then become outcomes. And what outcomes are is what was achieved from the initial outputs of the project. How are the initial outputs impacting your community in the long term? And that's what we would call outcomes. So here, in this instance, 5 jobs created. So I can see if we're having 500 new visitor days and 300 square foot of this theater has been improved. Obviously, there was not only a physical expansion, but clearly like a program expansion, right? So jobs would have been created to implement those portions of the project. A community is improved, obviously, because the theater has been rehabilitated and there's new programming and new space there. So again, with ARC performance measures, ARC has a guide to performance measures that's incredibly helpful for helping to identify the performance measures related to your project and give you a broader overview of what some of those looks like based on your project type. But the requirements for ARC projects is you have to have at least one output or outcome. So I can't advance back. Anyway, so the output are those things that are immediately produced as part of your project, and then the outcomes are how your community or individuals or participants of your program have been impacted positively from your project. So each project requires one output or outcome, and what we also need to see is an explanation of how those measures are estimated. Like, how did you estimate as part of your project you're going to have 500 new visitor days? How did you collect that information to report it during your project? And then how did you track it? So the methodology of how you tracked your performance measures. You can have performance measures that are applicable at the end of your project or up to 3 years after. And one key point too is that planning projects or planning grants or planning projects are the exception where they only typically have one single output, and that's to produce a plan or a report, obviously. So again, I just want to highlight, and I think you guys will be getting these slides, but to make sure to take a look at the resource guide for performance measures. It has a lot of really great information in there. So key takeaways, when you're providing performance measures for your project, it's helpful for us as reviewers to see a table of what your performance measures look like. So you would identify the performance measure that you're looking to achieve, the estimated number of that performance measure, whatever that may be, a written narrative to identify what that performance measure means, and then the methodology for how you're going to be tracking that. And again, the time frame, so either at project completion or for up to 2 years after. As we talked about defining your measures, what those mean. If you have any letters or of documentation or things that can justify your performance measures, those are also helpful to be included. And remember to use the ARC guide. Did you? Yeah.
So going off of that, we can go into some. Yes, ma'am.
You want about this question?
Yeah, I was.
I was like, you guys are really quiet. Please feel free to interrupt the presenter and ask any questions you might have, or if you feel more comfortable waiting to the conclusion of this morning's presentation, that's virtually fine as well, but just so you know, don't be shy.
There are no stupid questions. Um,
I think we all actually prefer the conversation.
oh yeah.
I was like, you guys are funny, but everybody's talking already.
It's Friday.
It's Friday.
That's true. It's been a long week.
It's been a long week.
But yes,
Alright.
sometimes the information
Yes.
can be a bit technical. So again, if you haven't submitted a federal grant application or managed a big construction project before, please ask, and we'll explain it to you more frankly. So some common application issues that we do see, we mentioned match calculations and documentation. So for every match that you have, provide a match letter confirming that this money is coming from this organization. That budget expenses must be consistent across all documents for all project activities. So many times the budget can change throughout the application process or through the contract phase. Maybe one match is not confirmed, or one organization is not providing grant funding. So in many cases, the match or the documentation will have to be changed, and ensuring that the budget is the same across all budget documentation is very important. And similarly, as Christy mentioned about the performance measures, specify your outputs and your outcomes that were in the link that she provided in the previous slide. These slides will be provided afterwards. So if you're not taking notes, don't worry. And they must align with our goals and objectives. In our program handbook, we also include examples of performance measures, what kind of performance measures are expected for, let's say, goal 1, or for an infrastructure project, or for a tourism project. And again, we can help guide you in deciding what the best performance measures are. And
I will say, did you want to say something?
You go first.
I was gonna say, folks that apply to our ARC program, and you all apply for grants all over the place. ARC is very strict about the performance measures. We do not have to tell our entire life story to ARC and I'm gonna give you a great example. So we had a project, my very first year at DHCD, we had a project, and this was in the town of Cleveland. And so, you remember the project, right? Because you managed it when you were at DHCD. And so the project was it was CDBG, so it was a downtown modernization project. So the match for the project was CDBG, Community Development Block Grant money. And the ARC grant was to help, they were gonna do a campground, and I think we called it the swinging bridge over the Clinch, or a bridge over the Clinch. And so it was a construction project. And so what was interesting about this project, well, we all know now the Clinch River is part of the state park system. And so this is 11 years ago, guys. And so they put 10,000 visitors will come to the town of Cleveland. 10,000 visitors were not gonna come to the town of Cleveland before the 3-year period was up after the grant was over. And so don't shoot for the moon, shoot for reality, and shoot for what exactly you have to put in the ARC performance measures, because I will say they're one of the few agencies that give you actual metrics to track. So if you're doing a workforce development program, students served are also students improved. And then you can give a narrative as to what you did and how they improved, like if you did a pre-test and a post-test. You can tell that story, but we don't have to pick like 9 metrics out of the entire, because we do that. I'm just gonna tell y'all. And so often we will leave them in there because we don't want to hurt folks' feelings. And then we do put it on AFC Washington or force me to go, and they'll go, okay, what are you really gonna measure? Because the other thing too is you are married to us. If you're doing a construction project and you say 10,000 people are going to town Cleveland, ARC will, once it's completed and constructed, they will close out the project. We, on the other hand, will keep asking you to count every year, post closeout,
3 years.
till you get to 10,000 visitors in the town of Cleveland that visited that campground and the Clinch River. And so we love y'all, but we don't want to have projects open. Some of us will be retired by the time some of these metrics will be in place. And so we want you to provide real, I know Bill, because Bill, he manages the project, so he's like, man, I gotta get these things under contract, and I think we need to adjust. We used to say, speak now, speak now, forever hold your peace. do you want to change these measures before we sign this contract? And so,
No, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but I mean, I think one of the tricky things always is you kind of know what you want to do with your project, but because of the performance measures, it's like, how does it line up with ARC's performance measures? How do we, not just like, we're gonna have these performance measures, but how are we gonna track them? Because as Tamara says, if you have a construction project, now, and I'll point out the difference between outputs and outcomes. For example, one of the things I'll talk about in a minute was a theater project. Well, the output was so many square foot renovated. But the outcome was then jobs created, new tourists in there, that economic development component. And again, you want to be realistic. You don't want to say we're going to have 100,000 people over the next 2 years kind of thing, because you will have to track that. And we're going to ask, how are you going to do that? How do you have the systems in place? Because once it's closed out, as Tamara says, we'll kind of follow up quarterly, and it's like, okay, where are we at until you meet that objective? So, really spend a lot of time thinking through, because whatever as it gets reviewed and gets it ultimately put into pathways, that becomes a part of your contracts with us. And it is something that you will have to continually report back on. So really think through that and spend a little bit of time. And if you have questions, that's one thing, you can reach out to us and we can help give you some TA and kind of think through what are good performance rates.
Yeah, so just as some context for performance measures. So ARC has our own list of performance measures. We have a bunch and we say, pick the ones that you think are the most appropriate to the project. And why we have those is because at the end of every year, every fiscal year, we pull all those metrics and we report them to Congress. And so it allows us to kind of translate our impact in like a standardized way, right? So performance measures are really important, but also if there's additional project benefits that, don't fall into, right, the performance measures, let us know. It may not be an official performance measure, but it's still very important to tell the story of the project. Yeah. Oh, and then one other thing, just quality metrics over quantity. Sometimes it may feel good to put as many metrics as you can think of, because it makes, I would think it would make your project seem better and more eligible for funding. But, realistically, pick the ones that are the strongest and the ones that you think are most achievable. And then you can add additional benefits for us to consider. But that's just context on that. Yeah.
No, less is more. Again, focus on having a quality application. Yeah, please.
Sorry,
No, go
one more
ahead.
thing. Also too, when you are doing your performance measures, we like to see, be realistic, but again, there isn't a penalty for not achieving your performance measures. So, I think some folks also are like, oh gosh,
maybe for your side of the.
For us.
Yes. There could potentially be penalties for Virginia.
Okay, well,
Sorry.
no.
Remember I said that once you're done with the
Well, no, she gotta
project,
explain.
ARC closes it out on their side, and they will still be counting. We very rarely had a project
3 years.
take money back. Yeah, 3 years. So ARC, after 3 years, will close it out once you've completed it.
Yeah.
We will leave it open so you tease your benefits. And so let's say you say you're going to create 100 jobs and you work with a company, and at closeout for ARC, ARC looks at potential. So right, it potentially, they agree to 100 jobs. We go reality, and so we will keep counting until we get to the 100 jobs. And so we do put things in place to secure the investment, so like a deed restriction or a letter of credit. And so we, just to share.
For non-construction as well?
For non-construction, we don't, but we do, if it's equipment, we do require a uniform UCC file.
Right, okay.
And so each state is different, and so I don't want to like
No,
pick on
just
anyone.
kidding.
Yes, we do.
Have them be realistic and
Yes.
talk to your coordinator and your state if it seems like, we may not hit our metrics, and they'll figure out. Just kidding.
Do you guys mind if I just close the loop on this real quick?
Yes, I think, you do this all the time. It's like a road show.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Because I'm glad that my colleagues stepped in to give additional context on the performance measures, because it's kind of a complex piece of the application. And so because of that, before your grant agreement is signed and your application is approved through, Virginia and ARC, folks like myself as project coordinators who will be reviewing your applications, I work all the time with applicants and grantees to help refine and modify their performance measures. And it's helpful to have a conversation about what do you ultimately think your project is going to achieve? Like, what do you see here? And we can work collaboratively to refine, to pare down, to find like the best performance measures that are going to demonstrate the positive economic impact of your project from a quantifiable perspective. So I know this like all sounds like a lot and maybe can sound a little confusing with outputs and outcomes. Clearly, I still struggle to explain it. Like, you saw that just a couple minutes ago. But I just wanted to put that out there, that as long as you put some thought into like what you bring to the project from the beginning, we're not just gonna throw you to the wolves and be like, you said you were gonna bring 10,000 people, good luck. We're gonna meet through your project and talk with you in greater depth about what those look like and help you refine those from an ARC perspective in collaboration with the state. So don't get too nervous.
Yeah, and I will say that project example I gave is a very old project. ARC back in the day did not have guidance around like tourism,
Yeah.
like those types of projects. And so I will say that there's been a lot of improvement to Christie's point where ARC would be like, oh, that's what the state agreed to, put it in the contract. And so I will say there has, and that's why I mean, we're state federal partnership, and part of the reason is not just because our money goes through ARC from Congress, it's because it's truly a state federal partnership. And so even if we let something slide, because sometimes we will, because we again, we don't want to hurt your feelings. We will send it up because in reality, ARC is going to review it and go, okay, let's realistically look at this. And the construction projects are very different than the non-construction projects, where construction projects often take longer to manage. And so we are very mindful about those metrics. And because we do secure the investment, we do stay connected with those projects a lot longer than non-construction because ARC manages those. And so there is a difference. And so, and each state is different. So if you apply for a Power and Rise grant and you are doing the project and let's say you partner with North Carolina, like the New River Trail project, and let's say they want to build a trail center somewhere on the new in North Carolina or West Virginia. I think the new goes to North Carolina, West Virginia, right? I got my geography right. And the trail center, you're a part of it because people don't know boundaries when they're going on the new. And the trail centers in West Virginia may have completely different requirements for your kid, like if whoever you partner with on that application, because there are multi-state applications. Not with area development, but Power and Rise. And so I do want to share that.
I actually was just in my West Virginia, we're right up against the West Virginia border and do a lot of their agreements. So if you're thinking about a project, the two of you, that you're in two different states, how do you apply that? Do you apply that in both states? Do you a type of this application, or how does that work if your partner is in another state?
So we might have to have an offline conversation about that. There's some intricacies in what type of funding you're applying for. Power and Rise, no brainer. Yes, you would be able to partner with the entity long as the because the other thing that happens, there are some counties that border our states that border our counties, and they're not actually in the Appalachian region. So West Virginia is a good thing in their entire states in the region. There are parts of North Carolina, I think still, maybe the other side of Henry County, I think, or not border, are in the region.
Or not, yeah.
And so that's interesting when the road goes through North Carolina, but the industrial site is in Henry County. Do I got that right, Catherine?
That's right.
And so we're like, we can't do an access road in Virginia because it's in North Carolina.
That's right.
And they're not in the region. And so we can talk more offline. Because if it was like community development block grant, it's very clear, like the benefit can only because some of our water systems cross over into West Virginia. So we would go, okay, this is what we have to do in Virginia. West Virginia has to contribute some money on the West Virginia side, even though the infrastructure is from Virginia. So we probably want to learn more about your project specifically to help provide TA.
Are you asking if both people have to apply or if you have a lead applicant secondary applicant?
I was more just, I wasn't quite that detailed.
Okay.
How does it work? Because,
Okay, so how about you really quickly tell us what you're thinking about?
yeah.
What are you thinking about?
A lot of our workforce comes from.
Okay.
So I think an offline conversation would probably be.
Okay. All right.
But it's true for a lot of us. We all go to West Virginia.
Yeah, and so and the thing is that we have great relationships with our counterparts in the bordering states, and so we can often go, hey, this thing is happening in Virginia. There's an organization also on your side of the border that's doing partnership. Because again, to Gail Manchin, you heard me say earlier, she's like, look, you pick up all the lines and we're one region. And so that's why there are programs like Power and Arise. Well, this is the last year of Arise, guys. And right now we know Power is still around. And so there may be a way to look at Power or Arise potentially being a resource versus our state program, which gets way more complicated. And so, I'm sorry, Omar.
No, no worries. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, you just released a bit of news, and I was gonna ask later, so, to tell that when you spoke about the other programs like Power and Inspire, Arise did not come up.
Right, because this is the last year of the Arise allocation from Congress. So when it opens this year, that'll be it.
What about Ready?
I don't know about Ready.
I think what I would say about Ready is that there may still, I think there's one more funding opportunity, and I can't remember if it's for nonprofits, local governments, or LGDs. I apologize, and in this instance, PDCs. But that funding program is also what I would say sunsetting.
But it doesn't mean you can't apply to our program for capacity. Well, we have to tweak the word, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you could apply to the word capacity, which is why the goal will change.
Yeah, and with Ready, I believe all of the capacity materials that have been published through ARC, even when the Ready funding program sunsets, those materials are still going to be available on our website and for organizations, local governments, nonprofits to still utilize. That's the best answer I can give.
Great.
Can I add a little?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So just for those of you who are potentially new, so just to kind of provide a little bit of an overview. So ARC has our what we call non-competitive funding, and that's our area development. That's our every year each state gets X amount of money and the states decide how that money is spent. But then ARC Washington has competitive programs. And so that's like Ready's what we were talking, Ready's competitive. Well, some, yeah, Ready, Power, Arise. So those are initiatives that are created by, certain administrations at the federal level that say, I want to target, coal communities. So I'm going to create Power, and Congress is going to give money specifically for that. So as different administrations come and go, those priorities for competitive programs may change. So that's why Arise is sunsetting, because it is no longer something that the administration is focusing on. So that's just a little bit more context as to why there's different opportunities, and some are run through the state, some come to us first, and it's, a lot of different areas, but that's some additional context that may be helpful.
All right. And from here we go into construction projects. Again, here are ARC's 5 goals that may or may not have some wording tweaked in the future. But the first one, building Appalachia's businesses. So what that might look like practically, a business park or an incubator or accelerator for local businesses. Building Appalachia's workforce ecosystem. So anything that's training workers or students pipeline into workers. And number 3 and 4 are most common projects that we do. Probably 70% of our projects are either infrastructure or culture and tourism. Again, infrastructure, very cut and dry, either broadband, water, sewer, some cases a rail spur, inland port. We have not had many of those. Downtown revitalizations. So again, there might be a historic building that needs to be renovated in downtown. Building regional culture and tourism, again, taking advantage of the environment here in Appalachia, as well as, a very deep history, and building community leaders and capacity. And in many instances, a project might overlap with multiple goals. So you might have 3 goals, but it's always good to focus on one rather than trying to hit all of them. Because there's always and ancillary impacts from every project. So for construction projects, we require a preliminary engineering report, but not at DHCD application in April. Eventually, you will need to get this. We do? Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, we do require a PER. It must, or a PAR if it's for an architectural report.
For a building, yeah.
Yeah, for a building. Yeah, it must be within a year. There we go. That was, it must be within a year, and many times during contract negotiations, or if you have to redo the budget, it might come up to another year, and you will have to get that PER redone. It does take a while, so yeah.
So you may not need to, so for example, we've had PERs that were done before COVID and then the project is applied for after, and construction costs are crazy. So if your PR was not done within a year, we may ask you to go back to the engineer, the architect, to update just the cost estimate to make sure that the costs are, aligned with the current dollars and whatnot, but yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I was gonna say same.
Or sometimes you may get recommended for an amount less than you originally applied for. And so we have to make sure so maybe your project has to be phased for construction. And so you'll have to go back to the engineer because ARC, they know, it's weird. So we have multiple phases. ARC wants to know about the multiple phases, but you're only getting money for one phase.
Okay.
And so, because we phase a lot, because the project is really expensive. And so to E's point and Bill's point, it's important to stay connected to your engineering firm until you actually apply, because you do have to get an update depending on the age of the PDR or the PAR. Or you may have to go back and face it based on the amount, because of course we have limited funds. And so we may go, we really love your project, but we can't give you this amount of money, but we can do this.
And the whole reason for this is to make sure that the numbers everybody's doing are the most accurate. And we saw it during COVID. We're starting to see it a little more now, not as much as COVID. But you come in and you have, I think of a project Pulaski that it started out as a $3-4 million project, and between COVID and by the time they got it out the bid, it was $5 or $6 million. And so they really had to go back and rethink what to do. And that's why we see a lot of that phasing. And I don't know if we want to talk about that now, about how you think through this, but in phases.
Yeah, let's do that. I think it makes sense. So just to, I want to just touch on the phasing really quickly, because this is really important and will hopefully be helpful if you do a construction project. So one thing, so ARC dollars are federal dollars. So one of the things we advise you all to do is to think about where ARC money is going to plug into a project, and think about if you can phase that off, or you can break up the project into different components. And why that's advantageous to you all is that when an ARC dollar hits your project, the whole project is like, quote, federalized, which means that your entire project, if it's not broken up into phases, needs to adhere to all of the federal construction requirements. So that's procurement, that's Davis-Bacon, that's, I don't know, NEPA, Buy America, Build America. Yeah. And those can be really stringent requirements. So if possible, if you've got a $50 million project and you can just say, well, ARC is going to work on the construction of this wing, and you can phase that off, when the ARC dollars hit that project, only that phase is federalized. So then the other phases, you can continue to do the work without having to necessarily adhere to the federal regulations. Virginia regulations will be different. But so just when you're doing these really large, and also for us, it can be difficult to look at a $50 million project and say, there's 8 different sources of matches or loans. And it can just be easier if you can phase it off and say, here's $5 million of the project. This is what ARC is going to do. So you're able to do that, work with the architecture engineer.
Yeah.
So
And that includes tax credits too, because a lot of times we are starting to see
Yes.
new record tax credits or historic tax credits. And so that also,
yes.
most folks, because the way the tax credits are structured or syndicated, sometimes folks don't realize they get federalized.
Yes.
And all the requirements also hit with the tax credits. And so, and they have a whole different set of rules. And so those
Right.
also,
Yeah.
because we just actually went through an audit with a project.
Yeah, and also in that phasing, I think one thing, again, to get back to what I was talking about performance measures is that phase, at the end of the phase, you have to be able to have those outcomes and outputs for that
Yeah.
phase, maybe not the overall projects.
Right.
Because you will have to have something tangible that you can report back on. So.
And it's okay to have 1,000 square foot building.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine, and you're building a training facility. It is perfectly fine, because we will still want to know, right?
Mhm.
Because you're gonna tell the story about it.
Right.
But it's okay to have a part of the, not a first floor of a building and you're doing a 3-story building, but it's okay to have, like, as to Eve's point,
Yeah.
a part of a building.
Right.
renovated with
And
Or a
sometimes-
renovation, things like that.
And sometimes we see this a lot in water sewer because it's part of a much
Yes.
broader project that you just break it into distinct phases, like we're gonna run, 1 mile of
Mhm.
of water line. And that's gonna be phase one and pick up so many households served.
Right.
And then knowing that you'll come back and try to keep
Yeah.
working that project to ultimately finish out. And, yeah, but then,
If you do it in phases like that, do you have to have, let's say you're doing phase one, your match
Yes.
ARC has to be spent in that phase, I see.
yes.
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 And we often will help, so we'll talk about it a little later, we do technical assistance sessions before the applications are due, and so you can have a call with us as an agency, and also sometimes we'll invite ARC to have a preliminary conversation, and we can help you all kind of structure it and understand the match, and also sometimes talk to if the match source is a fellow state agency and the timing sometimes off. We can also speak to the other agency. I think one year we had I think it was the BARTA. The BARTA
Yes.
had a state money, it was some state ARPA money that had to be spent before we even got the ARC approval.
Right.
And so we were able to, ARC was like, oh, well, they do have the money, but it's not gonna be part of our contract. And so ARC said, okay, we'll waive the match because we know that they've got to meet this deadline for this funder. And so again, ARC is really, what I'm stating is ARC is flexible. It's not as stringent sometimes as other federal grants or even state grants. And so most part, there's no like dumb question. Ask those questions because we will try to figure out a way to make it work, especially when a project is recommended by the governor, because that means it's important to the administration. And so like the BART project, they were really concerned because it was another state agency that was saying,
Yeah.
well, you can't keep holding this money, waiting for this money
Yeah.
over here. And so if they had told us that, if they would have spent the money, which has happened, we've had projects where folks have spent the money in the meantime, and then they've got to find another source. And so because there is you'll learn that you're going to apply to us in April. We say, don't assume a federal approval before October. So you got another funder and you're using money that you got a year ago, and they want you to spend it by June 30th. Have that conversation because they may be willing to extend the deadline, or ARC may be flexible once you're recommended. So.
And that's always something during those technical, is like a lot of times timing and trying to figure out the exact timing of things, and when you apply, if your match is there, maybe it may be a great project, but it's just this cycle is a little too early. You may want to come in later or something like that. So we're more than happy to have those conversations and try to think through that, understand where you're at and how it fits with the overall project.
Okay.
And now the match.
Yeah. And so, again, a detailed PR or PAR that fits the project activities and identifies all the funds by budget line item. So here we have our derivation of cost form, similar to the budget narrative prior.
Do you have to have your match funds committed at DHCD application?
You do not. You can have them pending. Let's say, for example, CDBG, the
What is
application.
CDBG? Omar?
Community development and block grant. So that's another funding opportunity within DHCD that you can apply for to also complement ARC match. And their application is towards the end of the year, so you might find that application or that match might be pending while you have all the other ones. So you'll be waiting until that match comes in. But of course, you can have the intention to apply at this time without having it confirmed.
Will the governor recommend a project without the match?
No.
Committed? Yes, they will.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
We won't send it to ARC.
We won't send it to ARC.
Yeah.
there may be a project in purgatory if I receive
Exactly.
it and you're waiting for some sort of match, which is totally fine, but we can't sign the agreement.
Yeah, you will not be under contract until you have all your money.
And again, that's
Account.
why that sometimes timing
Yes.
is an issue, and it might be better to wait, just depending on how firm that your match
And
is.
sometimes we're the match, like
Yeah.
Omar said, community development, we just had that with a project
Mhm.
where community development block grant was announced as Governor Youngkin was leaving office. The project had already been recommended by Governor Youngkin in August, the ARC had gone up. And so we were waiting for the letter from our own agency inside of it. And so we knew that, we kind of knew, like I said now, we knew what was happening, but we couldn't tell anybody. And so we had to wait till they officially got the letter. We took the letter, sent it to Eve, and now the project is moving on. And so we often ourselves will hold up a project waiting for it
Yeah.
out.
So again, when you do have that commitment of match, to please include a letter on signed letterhead pledging, the specific cash amount. Sometimes people don't put that exact cash amount, so please do that, and say whether it's cash or in-kind match. In-kind match, the limit is 50%.
Omar, do you mind if I just say something?
Yeah, of course.
It's important, but it's a kind of an administrative task. Highlighting the importance of making sure that the actual dollar amount is in your letter is super important. For project coordinators like even myself, we can advance your project all the way to our Office of General Counsel, and if they see in your letters that the dollar amounts don't match what's in your budget, they will kick it all the way back to us. So it's very important to make sure that that exact dollar amount matches up with the dollar amount of your match contribution. I just want to put that out there
Yeah.
because I've had plenty of projects that have stalled just because of like.
It's probably the easiest mistake
Yeah.
to make that leads to the most amount of time being wasted.
Yes.
There are situations where, we have a project now, I think it's the Giles County project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where they got ARC, but EDA didn't come through, I think.
Mhm.
And so we don't pull the award back on the Virginia side because it hasn't even gone to ARC yet at this point because it's still late. So we're working with the county to maybe restructure that and for them to find another match source. So we don't automatically go, well, the governor recommended you and you didn't get your other money. Oh, well, we cancel it. We still work with you. And we often don't send those large scale projects up to ARC because of course it'll, as we said, go into purgatory.
Mhm.
If we know you applied for CDBG and we kind of know within DHCD, we will slide it to ARC and let it sit down for a little bit because we know, but like we don't know about EDA or other federal funds. And so we will hold those and not even send them up because what's the point of going up if it's not going to get to the federal co-chair for approval? And so, because sometimes like the Giles County situation, the EDA money didn't come through. And so we're like, okay, well, we'll hold it here. And it's like, I keep saying, you like swipe a debit card. And so we're holding the money out of the Virginia bank account. It's pending. And we'll hold it there until they are able to find another match source. Or maybe we have to scale the project back, but we never say no, if a governor recommends the project.
If you have a quality project that we also recognize and the governor recognizes that it will have demonstrable economic impact, we will do as much as we can to help you get that moving forward. Even if we have to scale it down, scale it up, look towards other agencies within Virginia, we're here to help you. And again, as we talked about the phasing earlier, you want to make sure that you have a detailed breakdown of your costs, whether it's equipment and supplies for a construction project, or if it's personnel and time rates. So how much of this person's time is going to be spent on this project? How much will they be spending 100% of their time? So 100% of their FTE and salary will be included, or will it be 50%? Let's say they're a grants administrator, they're working on multiple different grants in a PDC, so maybe 30% of their time will be used. And similarly, it divides between ARC and non-ARC funds. So that's very important. If it is a phase, then we will stick to the ARC ones just so they know exactly where the money is going, all the way down to, I was going to say dollar and cents, but do not include cents. Please round up to the nearest whole number. Cents kind of destroys whatever fiscal algorithm they have.
Before you
Yeah.
go off that, one thing we see sometimes, and you can see it here, like with the construction, it has ARC and non-ARC. You don't have to every
Source.
activity have ARC and non-ARC. In fact, it's much easier. And a lot of times on construction projects, it'll be usually admin and construction, and then the match would be your A&E or maybe
What's
some
A&E bill?
architect and engineering costs. Thank you. Or your additional match for construction but it's easier that way. It's one, I think it's easier to manage, again, thinking through once you actually get the grant. But sometimes you'll see an application and it'll be like every line item, if you're a transitional county, it's 50%, non-ARC is 50%, and probably more than likely, if you are awarded, by the time it gets back to us, we would, during our contract negotiations, sit down and say, hey, let's make this a little bit easier to draw the money down in CAMs and really rethink that budget, because some of those costs maybe you can shift. Depends on the source of funding, but we try to make it easier to implement.
So Bill, what you're saying is try to put our money in one line item if possible, if it
Yes.
works for your budget. Versus sprinkling all across the
Yeah.
budget because we have to track it for
Yes.
the entire
Yeah.
duration.
Yeah. And it's easier to see that way too, like if it's a construction project, it's going to construct it. And it's a lot easier, I think, to see the impact of where ARC is done.
And the same thing I think with equipment too. You don't have to take the ARC, the budget and sprinkle it with every single line item you're gonna buy. That actually has happened. And so then we have to put a UCC filing on every
Yes.
single piece of equipment. And so just think about being strategic about your ask. And so in some cases, we have there's one piece of equipment that costs the exact amount of money as the grant. It's okay to put our money in one thing and use your match money for other things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and we will help you, if we see that, we will often recommend that,
Yeah.
during the TA session or even sometimes after it comes in and recommend it, we may go, okay, you've got $500,000. We think we need to restructure this budget before we send it up to ARC. So.
Yeah, we got a question in the back.
Yes.
No, we do not do pre-award costs on the ARC program because the project has to be approved by ARC before we actually officially get under for construction. So for non-construction, it depends on the time. So you apply in April for us. We often say, don't assume your application will start if it's recommended before October 1. And so most often folks will put October 1 as a start date. But if the project needs to start July 1 and it's not approved by ARC by July 1, there may be flexibility between July and October. And so we often will, if we know that, we'll talk to the reviewer and say, okay, they need to backdate this approval because of maybe a match source requirement. And so I would say ask, but we say don't start your applications, don't start the period of performance before October 1st of this year.
Yeah, and if possible, do not spend money before your grant is approved by the federal office, because it's difficult to get pre-award costs reimbursed. For ARC, our grant agreements have a certain period that they start and end, and anything that you all spend money-wise, and then any match that's spent, if it is outside that period of performance, it can't be reimbursed. So make sure you have a conversation with your coordinator or in the state to know, what is the correct date to start, and then don't spend money unless you want to risk potentially not getting it reimbursed.
And we've had that happen when projects have to rescope. So then we've had to actually literally rescope. I think you guys are going to talk about that project in a little bit, where we actually had to rescope the project. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Match, hey, perfect conversation.
Exactly. So what is match and what are acceptable forms of it? Most common, easiest to track is cash, just straight up. Also, you can get loans or funds from other federal third parties or partner organizations. Loans do count as cash. We don't really get much of this, but if they do come into an ARC project, most of them are from USDA's Rural Development Grant Program. which is also another one you guys can look at in addition to ARC. And then we have in-kind, which are contributions that are non-cash donations, so they can be in the form of real property, so it could be land, buildings, equipment, supplies. If it is land or a building, we need a MAI appraisal of it or the deed. And so again, other kinds of in-kind contributions could also be services. So personnel time given to the project, person on loan from another organization, donation of equipment use such as like a crane or a bulldozer, and engineering or architectural services. So the PR can be used as in-kind.
What?
Can a PER be used as in-kind match? Okay.
So for all match, anything that was accrued before the period of performance cannot be used for match. So if you did a PR 3 years ago and it cost $100,000 or something, you cannot use that as match.
You can also use indirect costs.
Can I say one thing about?
Yeah.
Okay. Match is just a little bit tricky, especially in-kind match. So a lot of projects that we get, we'll use in-kind match, we'll use volunteer time for a certain task. And I just want to hit a couple notes about using volunteer match or time as match, which is perfectly fine. The challenge comes with how do you quantify the cost of that volunteer time. So just as a kind of a way to think about it. So it's the University of Maryland every year publishes a nonprofit volunteer time match. I don't know what it is right now. So please default to that unless you are getting specialized services from a volunteer. So what I mean by that is if I'm doing, say I'm doing a planning study, I want to build a building, and we have a partner who's an attorney, and she's going to donate her time doing attorney things. Then you can use the attorney cost as your match. But if you have like advisory community or an advisory council and the attorney is serving, but they're not doing attorney things, you would not be able to use the attorney cost as match. Does that make sense? So it needs to correlate to the actual job they're performing. And in that case, you would use the volunteer rate. So that's tricky. I just want to clarify that.
And within a reasonable rate, equivalent to the market. We don't want.
Yes.
Yeah. So they will check. You don't want $1,000 an hour fees. And so how to document match? Again, Virginia ARC does not require match commitment letters by April 31st, but if you want your project to get under contract with ARC, you will need them at some point in time. And the document match must be on official letterhead or by copy, must include the exact dollar amount, signature by authorized representative. If it's property, you must need an appraisal showing how much it is. And for match requirements, as Eve mentioned earlier, each county is designated between distress or attainment based on, I think it's unemployment rate, two other measures similar to that. All the red.
Well, the specific.
Yeah, exactly. It's determined by EDA, so we'll trust them on that.
Yeah.
All in the deep red is a distressed county, so they're eligible to 80% match. So ARC will fund 80% of the project, and they will fund the applicant will fund 20%. So if it's $1 million project, ARC could fund 800,000 and the applicant will give 200,000. Similarly for at-risk, 70-30, transitional 50-50, competitive is 30-70, and attainment, which we only have one county representing attainment, they don't get anything. Which is Botetourt, which is good because they have now reached socioeconomic parity with the rest of the nation.
And actually, last year, they were competitive.
Yeah.
So as we talk about every year, ARC, they redo the metrics behind this, and the counties change a little. I think last year, Montgomery County was at this. It's now on transitional. So sometimes, hopefully they improve, but they move back and forth a little bit every year.
Yes, sir.
How do you determine the match for a project that spans multiple counties?
Yeah, so that's actually the very next slide. You're
Yeah.
just so ahead right now. I appreciate it. We have a handy dandy match rate calculator form. You plug in whichever counties that you're working in, and it'll take that percentage and take an average. So none of the distressed designations within a county that CDBG has or other agencies might use is very simple. You just take the average of whatever counties that you're in, or if it's one county, whatever that match rate is. If you are a city within the county, you just defer to whatever the county match rate is. Again, went through match commitment letters. Here's an example of what it looks like. Again, official letterhead, signature, exact a budget number there, only dollars, no cents. And you must also attach, actually, no, it's already in Pathways. You will enter in a work plan, a template. It has, the timeline of your project, outlining the key activities and tasks, who will accomplish those tasks, when will those milestones be reached. Again, who is the person or the organization responsible, and a general time frame. Obviously, this all comes before. There will be delays encountered along the way. So if the time frame does not line up exactly, that's fine, as long as you offer an explanation as to why that's not the case, why there might be a delay. Again, the delay might even be from the state or even on the federal side. So as long as you contain that within there. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna just to wrap up, I think we're almost done with all the what makes a good application. I just want to touch on a couple of special project types that have some additional requirements. ARC, we've in Virginia a lot, we fund sewer and water, but we do have a policy. So generally ARC doesn't like to fund sewer or water projects unless there is a business that's going to be served by it. So, however, we do make an exception for distressed counties. So in distressed counties, you are eligible to use money for water and sewer that only serves residential communities. So, just keep that in mind. So this one is a big one. So we get a lot of travel and tourism projects in Virginia, and that's one of my favorite things. But they require a little bit more preparation and background work to get approved. So travel and tourism projects are really fun, and they are legitimate economic development projects, but they can have some additional scrutiny from, folks who are like, hey, why are you spending money to do this really cool trail? And how does that impact the economy? So in order to kind of make sure we have that background work done, we have some additional requirements for travel and tourism. And so these are just for construction travel and tourism projects. So these types of projects need to align with some form of community strategic plan. So you need to be able to say, hey, I want to fund this trail, and look, the region, the PDC did a plan, and they also said that tourism is a priority or outdoor rec is a priority. So there needs to be alignment with your tourism project and some sort of broader strategic initiative. So that's number one. And then there also needs to be some sort of economic benefit. And so the way that we show that is through having a feasibility study done on the project or a cost benefit analysis. So you would hire an additional firm, or you would talk with potentially, a university or someone who has the capacity to look at your project and see what the economic impact of the project is going to be. So, that could be a marketing study that looked at similar venues nearby and showed, no, this is a good investment opportunity, or there's a market gap, or, could be a feasibility study that said, okay, based on the plan, we do think that there's going to be extra, $200,000 a year invested in the region because of this project. So there needs to be some more granular economic data that you can, show to justify your tourism construction project or your outdoor rec construction project. So one of the really cool things is we have planning grants. And so those are smaller amounts of money that we often give to organizations who are thinking about doing a rec or a tourism project, but that funding can be done to hire a consultant to, do the market analysis, do the feasibility study. And so we've had some really good examples, which we're going to talk about, of projects or organizations getting a planning grant, getting the planning study done in 6 months, and then they apply for more funding for construction. And you're able to check all those boxes off. So just keep in mind there's some additional, some additional requirements for tourism.
2 slides back now.
Oh, Lord. Oh, can I? Oh, God.
But I'm not plus text.
Oh, Lord. Hold on. The one on the oh, God. I can't press back.
Come on back.
Okay. Well,